This episode of Inside the Goblin Universe brought to you by Goblin Media. We bring the rabbit hole to you.
This is Lyle Blackburn, and you're listening to Inside the Goblin Universe.
Hello again, folks, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Goblin Universe. Now, the music that brought the show in is fronted by none other than Mr. Lyle Blackburn. He is the lead of Ghoultown, and not only is he a great musician, he is also a fantastic paranormal investigator, especially when involving cryptids. And we're very, very happy to have him here tonight with me and my co-host, Mr. Bryan Bowden. Mr. Blackburn, thank you so much for visiting Inside the Goblin Universe tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Now, I've been following you for a number of years on various types of TV shows that you were appearing on, plus the books that you were written. You know, fantastic case studies of certain events, especially with the legend of Boggy Creek. But it's only recently that I've been able to appear with you at certain conferences like CryptidCon, and then most recently the Mothman Festival. And I thought that you were, one heck of a genuine guy, and I was really looking forward to talking to you. So thanks a lot for coming on our program.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, I enjoyed, hanging out and being on the panel and everything at the conferences with you. So that's always great to meet in person and then, follow that up with the radio interviews. So
absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, one of my interests, of course, is Bigfoot. I mean, that's what got me started in the field. And besides the Patterson-Gimlin film, the next film that was the most influential on my young mind was The Legend of Boggy Creek. So let me ask you, how did you get started? How did you feel this affinity towards that particular area of Folk, Arkansas, or Falk, Arkansas, I guess they call it?
Right, Falk. Well, similar to you, I'd seen the Patterson-Gimlin film sometime on television when I was young. It just really... It kind of scared me to death, but also captivated my imagination. And I started reading up on Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, those subjects. And, I was also always into horror movies and things like that. I just loved, creature features and anything like that. So I also saw The Legend of Boggy Creek in a drive-in theater when I was really young. And for me, that's really what kind of cemented my love for cryptids, because I'm from Texas and Falk is just across the border into Arkansas. So while Bigfoot, the Patterson-Gimlin film, that was something of the Pacific Northwest. That was very far away from Texas. The case of Boggy Creek was something much more close to where I lived. So, that sort of, registered with me right then and there. And so ever since then, of course, The Legend of Boggy Creek was just a favorite movie. And then somehow later as an adult, I was good at writing and, always kind of wanted to write a book. And I thought, well, what's my favorite subject? And I thought, The Legend of Boggy Creek. I'd really love to know what was true about that movie and all the sightings it was based on. And that's just what got me going here and what, why I'm here talking to you, I suppose.
Right.
I remember the movie coming out too. I didn't get to see it in the drive-in, but it was still that kind of, you get that feel from these movies from when we were growing up. But knowing that it was so close to home for the most part, did you go out and looking for it, or were you able to do that? I mean, I know that when some of this stuff came out, I was just a young lad, and I wasn't driving any place, and trying to convince my dad to say, hey, can we go look for Bigfoot someplace? Would have just he would just look at me sideways like, what? But have you gone out? Did you go out early looking with it? Did you go out with friends? Possibly, when you're investigating Boggy Creek and the cryptid that they were talking about?
Well, I mean, after I saw the movie, I was so young that I didn't even fathom in my mind to even, I really didn't even have any sense of the geographical location. And my father, he's an avid bow hunter, and I was hunting with him since I was a kid. So we did go to a lot of these small towns, and we often camped in Arkansas. But I just never really asked, hey, Mom and Dad, can you take me to Falk, Arkansas? It was, and that was probably because I was scared to death of that, and I had seen enough small towns and all that. So I at the time, I never did, go up there or anything like that. It wasn't until, an adult that I, started getting the idea to write the book and things before I made a trip up there.
Well, can I go back to bow hunting with you for a second? When you were in the woods, bow hunting with Dad and the family, did you ever have strangeness or an encounter, or, you get that? I talked to plenty of hunters that they get to a point where they're having a cryptid coming in, usually like a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, and they just get this uneasy feeling, especially if we're talking about the legendary new Dogman that's been going around, depending on what part of the country you're in. So do you ever get a feeling like, this is not right, something's creepy here?
No, it never happened. I never saw anything when I was hunting. We deer hunted. I turkey hunted a lot of time. I never saw anything, nor did I ever get creeped out in the woods at all. I'm never.
That's awesome.
It's just I've never been scared by the woods, but also the place where we hunted was more in central and southern Texas. And if you looking at that now, there is just not a lot of Sasquatch reports in that area, nor have there been any particular number of Dogman. And so, I may have just not been in the right place during all those times of hunting.
Yeah. Now that being said, you have never witnessed any cryptid related firsthand account, have you? Encounter?
No, I've never, put my eyes on any of them.
That's right. And that's the same way with me. I never have either. And, Stan Gordon, the other guy that would appear with us down at CryptidCon, he's never seen anything either, but he's been doing this now for like 48 years. So there's just people that naturally have an affinity towards this. And it's a mystery that we're really trying to solve. And we do this by writing, and we do this by investigating. Now, as you were writing this book and as you were investigating the legend of Boggy Creek, how did it differ? How did the facts differ from what the film portrayed?
Well, I found that they didn't differ very much at the core of the story. Now, the movie is well paced, and it makes, it builds the tension, and it adds sensational aspects to it. So you have that, but essentially there's really, I could account for everything in there as far as it, originating from a witness report. And then that would just sort of be reenacted. And a lot of that, if you look at it now, it's like what you see later on Monster Quest and on even, the documentaries and things, the way Charles Pierce was having the actual people kind of reenacted as they would either narrate over the top or things like that. So, really it's, people kind of think that it was, there was a couple of sightings and then they made a movie. That's not the case. There was a lot of sightings, and he was able to kind of condense that into a seemingly shorter time period that, used those encounters, cinematically to tell the story. So it's a lot of based on fact,
Right. But he was so good at making the film because it seemed like a documentary. I mean, he was well ahead of his time. I mean, he was making one of these kind of movies that definitely influenced movies like the Blair Witch Project, 30 years down the line.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's, he just had in some ways he kind of stumbled on it, I think, because of the budget he had and what he had to deal with in filming down there in that little town. And so, and also just, I think he knew this was a true story, and he kind of started out actually thinking about making a documentary. So it really does have that docudrama feel. And that's one reason I was scared as a kid and was amazed because I remember watching the film thinking, how in the world was this guy there when that lady saw it? I couldn't understand it. I didn't know reenactment. This looked real, and those people.
Well, that led into that. That's what gets you right there at the core. It's like, this is real. These are real people. This is not like any movie I've ever seen, and you're looking at this thing like, is this, this could be any place at this point.
That's right. Yeah, actually, to this very day, I will not use the bathroom after dark. True story, because I'm afraid something's going to be reaching in.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's an iconic scene, and people, of course, I've been, out and doing conferences and things and book signings for, years now, and having the book, and everybody comes up to the booth and says, "Oh my God, that movie scared me to death." And many of them say they have problems going in bathrooms in country homes. So I totally identify.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, as somebody that is a fan of your books as well, too, I think that's it's important for anybody that has an interest in these places to also consume your books as well, because they kind of go a little bit more in depth than the 71 minutes the movie is, or whatever it happens to be. And I think that it's important to have that as a companion piece. And that being said, as a researcher and as a very good writer into the things that go bump in the night, who were some of the people that you admired as you were, coming up in the ranks in the crypto world?
Well, of course, guys like John Green and Lauren Coleman. I think a lot of my writing style compares to John Green, the author of Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us, because I'm somewhat of a journalistic approach. I mean, I'm an investigative journalist, I suppose, in many ways, as well as, a researcher that would go into, the actual woods and look around. But certainly, John Green had that journalistic approach. He just gathered the facts and presented them as they were. And then Lauren Coleman, has been a huge influence on me just in his investigations and everything he's done over the years. So, those are the two big ones. And then, just having read all sorts of books and I've written for magazines and things like that. There's been other writers and things that aren't necessarily cryptozoology related that have helped me along the way.
Yeah, very good, very good. Now, as a member of Ghoultown, of a band, you get to travel and you get to tour and you get to go other countries. Have you had the chance to investigate in other countries? Like whenever you were in England, did you happen to get across, into any of the woods that are left over there to look for any kind of wood woses or anything like that?
Well, it's really hard on the tours to do it because typically there's barely enough time to do the travel, to set up, sound check, play the gig, and get any sort of sleep. So unless I had a day off to where I could, get a ride somehow or take transportation to go anywhere, it was difficult. However, the last trip I was able to do, we went down to Whitechapel.
Oh, nice.
Jack the Ripper murders have taken place. So, we would do whatever we could, to kind of see the local stuff. And I was always more into seeing the weird local stuff rather than going to any tourist area, obviously. And, I was in Poland and we did get a chance to kind of traipse off into the woods out there. And, you've got all kinds of, strange werewolf type creatures reported in Europe and all that. So when you get in those woods over there and you go through those little hamlets and stuff in the mountains, you can almost see, a werewolf incident.
A vampire,
so,
vampires and werewolves.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
they have
Eastern Europe's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, they have all those old castles and it looks just like the movies because most of them are being used for all these werewolf movies and vampires and werewolves fighting each other. And you come across these things in the middle of the woods and you're like, yeah, this is not going to be good. Turn around to one of the guys who brought the garlic.
That's right. Now, what do your band members think about this? You have any band members in there that are closet crypto nuts or how do they perceive you?
Well, they admire the things I do, but none of them are particularly into the subject at all. They are entertained at what stories or facts that I will, tell them as we're out traveling around. So, they're not, they read the books and follow it like that, but they're definitely interested in it, and they don't.
Yeah,
they don't crack jokes at me.
yeah.
Or
I'm a
I'd
good
fire
friend.
them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm a good friend with Jonathan Downs, and he writes. He writes for a very serious rock magazine, and he said that a lot of these people find him rather strange whenever he brings up the subject. So I often wonder how you're perceived. But I guess you kind of straddle two different worlds, don't you? I mean, the rock stardom is one thing, and then your other stuff that you do, hunting beasties in the woods, is something totally different.
Yeah, it's two separate things, and I don't. People suggest that, you should write a Bigfoot song or whatever, but Ghoultown is its own thing, and it's been going so long that, my writing. I sort of have a day and a night job, and writing is just my job, and things like that. So, and people often ask me if when I'm out there and the other, I'm in a club situation or a rock venue or whatever, if anybody's ever given me crap or anything, nobody ever has. And I find it interesting that I can go to a venue and people will recognize me for both accounts and say, "Oh, you're in Ghoultown. I saw you on TV. You're the Bigfoot guy." And they'll be like, and they will want to know. They ask me about it. They're so intrigued. No one has ever made fun of me or anything like that. I'm surprised because you just, usually I hear stories about people kind of cracking jokes, but I guess in the world I deal in, and that people are just very interested in that, and they really want to know, what I think, what do you think? And that's been pretty cool.
Well, that's a great aspect and a great experience for you. A lot of times, a lot of people in this field will get ridiculed left and right. Forget it. If you saw a UFO, forget that too. And it's wonderful when someone comes up to you, especially as a musician, and you're an artist in two different, a couple different formats, and they respect you in each one of them. I mean, like that's the grand prize. That's the holy grail. And it's an amazing feat that you get that.
Yeah. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect when I started down this path, and I didn't even expect the path. I just sort of took time off from the band just to write a book, and that was simply what I wanted to do, and I had no idea it would sort of turn into what it did. But it's just been a surprise that I've met people that are interested. And in fact, some of the best accounts I've ever gotten have resulted from me meeting people in the context of the band and them saying things like, "Well, my dad saw something, so-and-so year," and I'm like, "Really? Can I talk to your dad?" And then I'll end up talking to somebody who's never told their story to anybody because nobody ever asked. No paranormal or cryptozoology researcher has ever asked. So there's been some great accounts that I've gotten that I probably would have never known about had I not kind of been out there in another venue, I guess.
Right. Now, what is your take on Bigfoot? You had mentioned that. What is your brief synopsis? What are we dealing with, or is the jury still out on this thing in your mind?
Well, I sort of just operate under the hypothesis that it's some sort of a flesh and blood biological creature, some sort of an ape, obviously, whether that's descended from Gigantopithecus or I don't discount the Neanderthal kind of thinking, or if it's some it's just some hairy hominid that somehow avoided discovery and capture all these years. So, and I understand that the problem with this is that it goes on and on and on without being able to prove that these creatures exist, then all kinds of theories are going to be proposed. And, that's just natural because we're all trying to explain something that is seemingly, unlikely and improbable. So, but for me, I just kind of, I haven't seen or, I don't have any proof of anything otherwise that it's not simply an ape. So, I just operate under that pretense until I, see different.
Well,
something else comes along.
Yeah, or do you prepare yourself and mentally? Have you prepared yourself that if you go out and then you start investigating and read it, going into the stories that you're hearing and searching, that you one day will come up against this cryptid, and how you would react at that point?
I kind of think of that, especially if I'm in context of being in, the deep woods or on the bayous where people have reported seeing these. I kind of imagine to myself, what if I saw that thing right now? What would I think? What would I do? And of course, I feel like that would be exciting, but I can also understand how it would be somewhat frightening, and it just depends on how close you are to it and what that thing really looks like and what it does when it sees you. So, but I'm all about it. I'll run towards it. People point and say they see something. I'll run right towards it, because I come from a hunting background.
I'll tell you, one of our investigations we did in my group in New York, and you're more than welcome. We'll take you up to our spot. There's a lot of Bigfoot up there, and I didn't physically see the creature, but you felt the ground. I had a boulder thrown at me, nice size rock, and whoops that scared the what out of me, to the point where it got all of our attention. We were up. You could feel the pressure in the air, and it's one of the most adrenaline feelings you'll ever get in your life. So until you experience it, it's cool. It's great when you look back on it, but it can be very, very terrifying, because the size of these creatures, right? I mean, look at the bathroom scene again. These things are ginormous.
That's right. Well, if we could shift gears a little bit here and go from a hairy covered creature and start talking a little bit about the lizard man.
Yes.
Which is another one of these freaky cryptids out there that Lyle did such a good job in the true story of the Bishopville monster. So, Lyle, what's going on here with the lizard man?
Well, yeah, that one's, starting to get into, even further uncharted waters of reptilian humanoids and things like that. But, basically I was always interested in the reports from Bishopville, South Carolina, in which people said they had seen a, 7-foot tall reptilian humanoid that the locals called the lizard man. And a lot of that case took place in the late 80s. And one of the most sensational encounters was when this young man had a flat tire out in this area called Skateboard Swamp, and as he finished up changing the tire, he saw something running at him. At first he thought it was a person, but then he realized this thing was some sort of a creature. It had like 3 fingers, and it was brownish or greenish, and it looked reptilian. He jumped in his car and took off as this thing tried to attack him. And so I ended up going out to Bishopville with a fellow investigator, Cindy Lee, and we talked to the police officer that was involved in the case, and we looked at all the newspaper articles and, talked to some of the witnesses that we could find. It's just a really interesting story. So basically my book is just that story and offers up the various theories that people have proposed, but certainly it's more unexplainable even than Bigfoot, because a lizard man or a reptilian humanoid is further off the biological scale. So it's a great and fascinating story, really.
Did you get to ever meet Davis and see the vehicle and all the scratches and the damage done? Do they still visit?
He was killed he was in his house one day, and some dudes came in with a shotgun and shot him. To be blunt.
Wow.
Some very bad stuff. I think he probably regretted ever seeing the lizard man. I think he had, or even saying that he did, a lot of problems in life, and ended up getting murdered in his home. So unfortunately, bad circumstances plus, that no one's able to interview him. However, I spoke to the Sheriff Truesdale, who was the sheriff at the time, and he interviewed the young man. He knew the family, he knew the father, and saw the car, and he looked into this very seriously. And was quite certain that something happened to this kid. I mean, he wasn't making this up, and it wasn't, he wasn't delusional. Something happened, and that was coming from a well-trained police officer.
That's it. It's always very interesting that when the police get involved and they actually take it seriously, and they don't believe oh yeah, it's another kid, he's making stuff up. I've been told by several people that throughout the country we have police divisions, and I'm in New York City at this point, and there is one in New York City that has a special division, kind of like the X-Files. Are there any other witnesses in that area that that the police officer actually investigated, and any new leads coming out, or is it just?
Yeah, is Lizardman still being seen?
Right. But is there any bigger sightings? I haven't been following Lizardman. When I learned about Lizardman, the first thing I thought, relating back to the UFO side of the spectrum, is a lot of people talking about lizard aliens, and maybe with
reptilians,
inner Earth,
right?
Reptilians and inner Earth dwellers. So,
sure. There's not really been any credible sightings in that area that have continued. The most of that case was, in a certain flap of late 80s into 90s. I've spoken to some of the witnesses myself. The sheriff at the time had interviewed all these people, and in one case there was a family of three people that saw a creature fitting this description, and the police had the wherewithal to take them in and separate them and have them write down their statements. So I literally had access to all the police records the statements that these folks had done. So the police in this case, believe it or not, I don't know that they necessarily believed there was a lizard man, but they thought that whether it was a rogue bear or if it was a human playing tricks, that somebody could get hurt. So they wanted to find out what was going on, and that was a plus. Now, as far as the subterranean reptilians and all that and the UFOs, that's certainly, some of the theories that people have proposed, because, once you get the description of a reptilian humanoid type figure, there have been UFO reports and, subterranean theories, and I sort of throw that in there as well. Just, although I find there's not a lot of cave structures in that area of South Carolina, nor were there UFO sightings that corresponded to the sightings of the lizard man. So, who knows?
Yeah, and I am in no way a conspiracy theorist, but Bryan and I were just having a private conversation the other day, and it seems very odd that people that do have these eyewitness encounters with cryptids or anything slightly supernatural or out of the ordinary, sometimes they end up in not very good situations. I mean, people see a UFO or a lizard man or a Bigfoot. A lot of times these people end up, deceased under very strange circumstances.
Very suspect. Very, very suspect.
Well, that's true of this. Several of the witnesses in the Lizardman case came to very strange endings, and so kind of that's in the book as well. But yeah, you're right. There's just something about that, and I don't know if that certain people have an affinity to see or encounter these creatures, or and then their lives are just a little bit different than everybody else's, and then strange things happen, or the strange things a result of them having seen or experienced these strange incidents. It's very interesting.
Well, we can go back to when you guys were down in Mothman. I mean, look what happens. This Mothman appears, and are they foretelling an event that's going to come? Like a death event, or is it Native Americans would have looked at it as a sign, like the coyote's a trickster. If you see this creature, you're not going to make it. Just like the Wendigo, or the Skinwalker. You meet a Skinwalker, that pretty much means you're not going to be around much longer. Do you think there's a correlation between the Mothman and possibly the Lizardman because of kind of certain characteristics?
Well, I think, the cases are similar in that there's several elements to it, and they're extremely hard to explain. And ultimately, if people say, it's nonsense, those people are crazy or whatever, but they're not. I mean, these people saw something, and same with the Mothman, same with Lizard Man. Something was going on. It's just that we can't quite definitively
put our finger on
what it is.
Yeah. That's right. And these are all creatures that simply stepped out of inside the Goblin universe, and that's why we're here. We all have this sense of adventure in us, and we really want to get to the bottom of the story, but you never get to the bottom of the story. The deeper you go, the more confusing it becomes, and it's almost like a labyrinth that you're walking. Hopefully we will end up in the same place eventually, but right now there's so many twists and turns, it becomes disorienting after a while. But again, to all of our listeners out there, if you already do not have Mr. Blackburn's books, I urge you to go out there, because you will look at these events such as Lizard Man or such as the Boggy Creek incident, and you will be looking at it from different perspectives. And as an investigator and as a researcher, that's necessary to do.
Yeah, and I recommend if you're one of the books you should definitely pick up if you're into these creatures and into these cryptids and these events. Lyle, your Monstro Bizarro is the manual of mysterious monsters. What a way to start off. Talk about digesting something that'll keep you up at night. Great book and a great manual, actually.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a book that often it doesn't fit the format of my others, and it was done for the Rue Morgue magazine library, and I write for that magazine. It's a horror magazine that can be found on the shelves of Barnes and Nobles and things bi-monthly. But the Monstro Bizarro came out of that, and it was a great opportunity because in a lot of ways I'm able to write to an audience that doesn't normally read cryptid books, perhaps. And so it's got a lot of content where cryptids have been in horror movies, of course, and a lot of that sort of stuff, a crossover. And then I also interjected that with actual cryptid cases, and say, werewolves are not just in the movies. People have reported seeing dog men, and listen to these amazing sighting reports and Linda Godfrey's books. And it was really a fun book to write. And just encompasses the whole world of cryptozoology, from the pop culture aspect all the way to the investigative, real life sighting aspects.
It reminded me of one of the first books I was ever introduced to back in the 70s, and the book was called The Greatest Monsters in the World. And it literally was, this wasn't as popular as it is today, but this book had everything. It had Loch Ness and Bigfoot and UFOs and aliens. I mean, it was all in this little, paperback. We couldn't get enough of it digesting this. And I think you do a great job of that. That's my feel of it with this book and this manual, actually. What a fantastic job.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And I know that the Greatest Monsters in the World book as well. I've got it. And that kind of vibe has stuck with me because I read those books when I was a kid. And, that's definitely an influence on
it wasn't,
things I do.
These things weren't around as much. It's not like, we didn't have the internet, That's right, people. We did not have an internet. So we actually had to go to a library. And most libraries where I am, even in New York City, which is a little bit more liberal with what they have, you're not getting these books. They'd look at you sideways like, you want a book about Bigfoot? What is that?
You know what, guys? I was actually lucky because I grew up. I was in grade school in the 1970s, and I went to a Catholic school, and I am convinced that one of the nuns was a closet cryptozoologist because this small library, which was no bigger than my dining room right now, had so many books on cryptozoology and UFOs. It had, Von Däniken, had On the Track of Bigfoot. It had all these great books in there. So I'm convinced that out there somewhere, Sister Mary Adrian, God rest her soul now, probably did some research into cryptozoology because she stocked those shelves so well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I think, and that, like I say, that was lucky that you had that, and these books were hard to come by, and but therefore, on the other hand, they were more treasured. You know what I'm saying?
They
Like,
were, yes, right.
you could only get a couple of them, and those I would read. I had one called Strange But True or something. I must have read it like 50 times, because you just couldn't get a lot of these books. And, you couldn't march down to the bookstore. You can't tell your parents to try to find them because your parents were just as stumped about what they were as anybody.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they look at you sideways. But what was great about growing up when we grew up is the fact that reading more and getting interested, and then that teaches you how to do the research on the catalogs, right? And
right.
Has that helped you? I mean, what is that part of why you're successful in putting out these great novels and books? Is the research aspect of it what you've learned when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still have an inquisitive, childlike wonder about it that, combined with a, journalistic skill that makes me able to kind of hunt down the facts and then also tell them in a way that would have thrilled my young self, back then. So in some ways, I'm just kind of writing books that I would have wanted to read back then, with added depth of, facts and checking and, references of to these cases and things and newspaper reports. So it's all that has sort of been churned into what I do.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Lyle, because as we're walking down this road of nostalgia, one of the things that we need to point out that, books back in the 70s had to go through a publication process, something that doesn't happen today. So a lot of these books that people are reading on various monsters, various cryptids, there's not a lot of fact checking that's going on because a lot of these people were publishing them themselves. So I think you have to be very wary now. It's a lot more difficult as a young person who is interested in the cryptozoological world to come across something that is actually based upon fact, because there's a lot of people out
there. Yeah, they're just trying to take some money from you.
But a lot of this stuff really doesn't have any kind of it doesn't have any bearing in the factual world or any kind of scientific approach or anything.
Yeah, that is a problem, and I do attempt to trace back the story to its origin before I don't regurgitate books that don't have bibliographies and things like that, and I trace them back. And luckily, my books are published by Anomalous Books, and they have a very fine library of publications they've been doing for more than a decade with top quality authors, and they also kind of will hold me to that standard, and of course I just want to be thorough, and I want to tell the story as pure as possible. So look at the bibliography or the index of my newest book, Beyond Boggy Creek. It will earmark everything that I quote or say in there back to its original source. So I find that important to do, and you got to be wary of books that do not, that just say, well, this happened and this and this and this happened, yet it has no endnote to say where they got that fact. I've seen tons of wrong stuff on the internet. I find out, this is all wrong, and then I trace it back to the source and say, well, here's actually the real story. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the notion, let us say, of the Dogman, and I wrote a book a couple of years ago entitled "On Dogman: Tracking the Werewolf Through History." I was very lucky that Ken Gerhard was able to write a very nice introduction for it. But there was one particular incident that I really wanted to get the truth out of, and that was this Land Between the Lakes incident of a dogman ripping a family apart and attacking and killing a bow hunter. But I could find no corroborating evidence about this event ever taking place.
Yes, I know the one you're talking about. It's very sensational and very cool. But as you start trying to find the source of it, you're like, what, You got to be careful about quoting that as, Because what happens is then it gets passed down like, oh, well, this happened and this happened. And now it's a third or fourth story version of something with no track record.
Right, it's the old telephone game. That's basically what it becomes.
It is, but the thing is, the people are buying it wholesale. I mean, they're even putting on Dogman events in this area because it has that it's associated with this particular, killing that probably did not even occur.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that happens, and there's been a few. Even in Texas, there's been a few reports and stories of that nature where people were supposedly killed and this and that. And, when I start digging at it, going back to this person and this person said, and try to get these hospital reports and everything else, it's a dead end. There is it's not fact. It's just what people have been saying.
Yeah, I mean, a great resource, and I think he does a great job, is Vic Cundiff. With his Dogman encounters, but some of the reports coming out of Texas was scared the hell out of you. These creatures coming out from underground wells and trapping people inside. They're playing games with people, like knocking on the front door and the back door at the same time, wanting you to come out. We have actually a lot of Dogmen, believe it, in New York State, and there was one recent sighting. We're investigating actually right now. I'm part of that North American Dogman project for New York State. That's one cryptid I'm very interested in. I'd like to see, but at a distance, because the thought of it is it's just improbable. It's like a 12-foot werewolf, a killing machine.
Yeah, that cryptid I wouldn't run toward, and I would probably go in that direction. That's a whole other deal there, because that's real. But those are truly probably one of the most frightening, alleged cryptids there are. Is the Dogman?
That's right. So what cryptid is in your sights now, Lyle? What are you going to be, chasing down next? What book are you working on? What's it going to involve? Let us know. Break it here on Inside the Goblin Universe.
Well, I'm working on a few things. A book that is not specific to one cryptid, but more specific to certain types of geographical locations. So that would be a book that would have a lot of different monster accounts in it, which is kind of fun. Also working, speaking of Dogman, I'm involved in the Small Town Monsters films, and going to be working on one starting next year. We're going to do the Bray Road Beast.
Nice, yes. Very cool. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's exciting, and I typically, probably like Mothman, I narrated that one and I co-wrote the script, so that'll probably be part of my duties there. And working on another visual type project of which I cannot divulge at this moment, but let me tell you, this is probably the biggest and coolest thing I possibly have been involved in yet. So good things coming up.
Good.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Now, before we switch gears back to the crypto world, we talked a little bit about the mainstream media and such. Let me ask you, Lyle, what is your favorite horror movie? What scares you?
Well, I mean, of course, my favorite movie, I'm obligated to say The Legend of Boggy Creek, and it probably is, but to not be that one, my favorite horror movie is probably The Shining, the Kubrick film.
Oh, the original.
That's my favorite. But John Carpenter's Halloween is one that I love. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those. As far as ones that scare me, hardly scared by horror movies. It's hard to think of one. I mean, if I think back in time, maybe like The Exorcist, I can recall that one having spooked me quite a bit.
I remember that. That kept me up. That was one of the few that really did keep me up at night.
Yeah. Actually, I refuse to see it. I've never seen that movie because I know. No, it's because I know that it would damage me in some way. So I just stay away from it. I just stay away from it. But Bigfoot related movies, because there's so many of them out there. What do you think, besides The Legend of Boggy Creek, what do you think is the another very good Bigfoot movie out there?
Those, there is a ton of Bigfoot movies. In fact, I do an article in that Monstro Bizarro book where I cover the history of numerous. But they're few and far between as good ones. My favorites are The Creature from Black Lake, which was 1976. There was a made-for-TV movie called Snow Beast that I like. And then as far as modern films, I think Exists by Eduardo Sanchez, director of Blair Witch Project, is quite a good Bigfoot movie, and one of the better ones that's been made. There's one called Paper Dolls that I don't even know if it was ever in wide release or if you can even get it, but that was very cool.
What about Willow Creek? Have you seen Willow Creek?
Oh, certainly. I think that's a good one too. In many ways, I'm not fond of the found footage approach, but Bobcat did a really great job with that, and I think it was not your typical Bigfoot style, it comes from the woods thing. So I do like Willow Creek quite a bit as well.
Yeah. Now, not crypto related anyway. Your favorite band, of course, Ghoultown. What is your favorite band besides Ghoultown?
My two favorite bands of all time are the Misfits and Merciful Fate.
Oh, the Misfits! Thank God. There you go. Well, there's a reflection in the music, actually. If you listen to Ghoultown, I can feel little Misfits in that.
Yeah, but nobody.
Certainly.
No kid nowadays knows the Misfits, though, because whenever you think of punk, anybody born after 1984, 1985 are going to automatically think of bands like Green Day that could nowhere, they could not even keep up with these people.
I don't know if I'd beg to differ on that. The Misfits just sold out the L.A. Coliseum in about 60 minutes.
Yep.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They are humongous. But, the Misfits were, I was a fan of those early when the original band was around. And then in years later, of course, I've come to know most of the guys in the band, and Ghoultown's played with them. And in fact, we were playing once at this 2-level thing in Houston once, and we were playing the downstairs level, and they were playing the big level upstairs, and I looked over on stage, and I see one of the members of the Misfits singing one of our songs, and that was like the highlight of anything, and ever since then we became friends, so it was amazing.
That's awesome. Are you generally a hardcore kind of guy, like the New York hardcore scene in general?
When I was a young kid, junior high and high school, I was into the hardcore punk scene. My favorite bands are like from up in that, the Misfits and Bad Brains and like Black Flag. Well, that's more West Coast, but all of that early hardcore punk.
One of my friends actually, I've known for years, Drew Stone. He just did the New York hardcore movie. And he's actually in Europe right now, doing some releases and premieres with him. But he was in Antidote. He was one of the lead singers in Antidote, and Drew Stone. And I remember growing up on this stuff, and then I remember looking, I'm like, oh my God, that's Drew. When you see these guys. But there's nothing like having somebody you've been growing up with and listening to singing your music. You just, wow, that's like hitting the lottery. Musical lottery right there.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. And my other favorite band is Merciful Fate, which is the European Danish metal band led by King Diamond, which is a huge rock star now. And he, by some strange circumstances, moved over here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, and we became friends. And he's one of my good friends now. And it's just kind of hard to imagine that. Just by coincidence only, my two favorite bands, I've gotten to know personally got to know them, so it's I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah, what's going on with Texas? Because you not only with the bands here going on, but you also have Ken Gerhard and Nick Redfern there. What's happening in Texas?
A lot of cool stuff, I guess.
I guess.
I almost was down in Texas. I was going to go to University of Texas in Austin, and I should have. Would have been a lot nicer. But that's a great. You got a great state.
Yeah, and it's it's been really fun to work with Ken and Nick, and we we're great friends, and often share discussions and talk about things or travel to events, and we drove to Mothman the year before last all together, so it's great to have those guys here, and we're all kind of like-minded, and of course I looked up to those guys very much because they had written books prior to me writing a book, and I can't say enough about how nice and helpful they have been in opening the door and helping me out, as in getting into this. So just some really great guys.
No, they are, and I can tell you that as well too. As I said, whenever I was just getting started writing about the paranormal and about cryptids, I just reached out to Ken Gerhard, and he was very, very kind to me, and he kind of walked me through everything, and he actually recommended a few things. So yeah, I cannot say enough about you guys. I think that it's been absolutely fabulous. So while we still have you on the show here,
yep, we got about 7 minutes, guys.
7 minutes coming up.
Unfortunately, we were just getting started. So,
tell us some of your appearances. Where are you going to be at for the rest of 2017? If you have any dates for 2018 yet?
Yeah, things are starting to line up. I've been out quite a bit here this month in 4 different states. The remaining dates will be this Thursday night in Homer, Louisiana, at the public library there, and then that's followed by this weekend at the Texas Bigfoot Conference in Jefferson, Texas. That's going to be a big one. That wraps up my appearances for this year, and then next year I think I'm at the Pensacola Comic-Con in February, Minerva Monster Day next June. Those are the ones I've got lined out. So, always, if people hit up lyleblackburn.com, it's got the list of dates, and hopefully I'll, slowly but surely make it to most of the areas around.
Yeah, and lyleblackburn.com, they can also buy your book.
Yep.
They can even have an autograph, can't they?
Yeah, I've actually got my own online store, and of course my books are available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and places like that. But if you go to my site and go through my web store, you can actually get autographed copies, and it's a good way to get something that not everybody has.
That's right, a one of a kind thing. That's absolutely, and you also have shirts on there, which is really cool as well too. So yeah, I recommend lyleblackburn.com. Now, to get their hands on your music, what's the best way to find that, Lyle?
That would be at ghoultown.com, GHOULTOWN. Of course, there's a link there from Lyle Blackburn as well, but, Ghoultown music is available everywhere that finer music is sold, and that's, a lot of digital these days, so iTunes and Amazon and Bandcamp and CD Baby, and you can also grab physical CDs from ghoultown.com.
And
so
are you going to be doing any U.S. tour again? Or are you going to be touring around some of the states with Ghoultown?
Well, unfortunately, this is kind of there's quite of a problem in how much we can tour due to what I'm doing. So the project I'm about to start, unfortunately, will negate any Ghoultown touring, which is kind of bad. We had a new album come out this year, but it's almost impossible for me to be able to do any extensive touring. So most of the dates we do are sort of one-offs or short stints here and there. So nothing lined up at the moment due to this other project.
Right, this other project that will remain nameless as of yet. But you know what? It's so tantalizing, my friend.
It is. But would you come back onto the Goblin universe and discuss this new project, the mystery project?
Well, once it comes out.
Yes, when it comes out. Of course, when it comes out.
Yes, I'm quite certain that that myself and the other person involved will be glad to come on the show. And when you see the news, you will say, okay. and then you will send the email and say, hey, man, we got to have you on. So, yeah, it'll be definite. And, I'm not sure when this can be made public because I'm not completely in the driver's seat of this, but it's exciting. So, hate to be vague and stuff.
Yeah. No.
Vague,
that's good. That adds the mystery to it. That adds the mystery. That's what we want. That's what most of the fans want.
Yeah, I'm excited for you, my friend. Yeah. Again, I've always been an admirer of you. I think that the work that you do is incredibly intelligent, well-researched. And of course, I didn't know you, and the first time I got to meet you was just a couple months ago. And you are a very genuine person. I think that that's really what's lacking in the world. Yeah. And I truly do mean that. And I thank you for spending your evening with us inside the Goblin universe. And I'm sure that the listeners will become as big of fans as we are of you, Lyle.
Well, thank you very much. It was great to meet you too, and that's one of the things that I love about this is reading people's books or hearing them on the radio or knowing them or seeing them, and then actually getting to meet up in person. It's just like a huge network of like-minded individuals. So that's always a really
it is. Yeah, but there's a lot of. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice, too, because you said something when we were on the panel together that was very pertinent. You get to see us more than you get to see your family, which I think, that shows that there's a big sacrifice to this. If you're going to go out in the woods hunting monsters, you're also giving up a great bit of your life as well, too. So we thank you for that sacrifice as well.
Yes, that is true. It is a lot to do, and, but, I strike a good balance between, family being home, trying to, appease the little town fans, and also, continue to write books and other things. So it's a lot to do, but it keeps me out of trouble.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
No, we just can't.
Mostly.
Mostly out of trouble. This has been an incredible experience having you on here. Really fantastic talking with you and learning more about Ghoultown and all that you do. Always been a fan, and we're definitely going to have to go, unfortunately. But Ron, we'll play some Ghoultown on the way out of town.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They're going to take us out of inside the Goblin universe, and I cannot
yes.
wait. Wow, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend, and we look to talk to you in the very near future.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Ronald Murphy.
I'm the other co-host, Bryan Bowden.
Thank you for stopping inside the Goblin universe with Lyle Blackburn tonight. Ghoultown is playing us out, folks. We'll see you next time.